Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into the soft, sun-baked world of ancient Mesopotamia. Picture this. The air is warm and a little gritty. The scent of clay ovens and marsh reeds drifts past your nose, and you're squinting through a pale yellow haze as two boys chase a goat through an alley made of crumbling mud brick walls. You're not in any kind of rush. Your sandal slaps slowly against the packed earth, and for once, the only thing on your to-do list is teeth. That's right. You're here to learn how ancient Mesopotamians cleaned those pearly, or more realistically, somewhat yellowed and slightly chipped, whites. And honestly, you probably won't survive this oral hygiene routine without a strong gag reflex and a pretty relaxed attitude toward sanitation. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling extra cozy, drop your current location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world we're falling asleep together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the outskirts of a Sumerian village just as the morning haze is lifting off the river. The Tigris is close. You can smell its mossy breath, and somewhere nearby, someone is already pounding laundry on a flat stone. The homes here are squat, sun-dried cubes made of mud brick, each with little reed mats hanging in the doorways to keep the flies out. A stray dog lies curled beneath a fig tree, twitching gently in its sleep. And near the central plaza, you spot a cluster of women gathering reeds, children splashing at the water's edge, and there it is, a man squatting with something twig-like pressed to his mouth. You squint. Is he brushing? Well, sort of. In ancient Mesopotamia, teeth cleaning wasn't some formal, universal morning ritual. It was more like a casual act of maintenance. If your teeth hurt, or felt gritty, or your breath was scaring off your friends, you'd do something about it. Maybe chew on a twig. Maybe rinse with river water. Maybe just hope the gods weren't looking too closely today. Mainstream archaeological records show that dental care wasn't standardized in this era, but that doesn't mean it didn't exist. Evidence from burial sites suggests that people took at least occasional care of their mouths. Some skulls show signs or wear patterns that match twig brushing. Others have visible cavities, often untreated. A lot of teeth were lost before death. Some weren't. And then there's the silt. Mesopotamia was cradled between rivers, which meant the food was often cooked with or preserved using mineral-rich materials, ashes, clays, and yes, river silt. The bread alone, usually made from stone-ground flour, often contained enough grit to do a fine job accidentally polishing your molars, while also slowly wearing them down. A win-lose situation. As you stroll past a bakery, the scent of flatbread pulls you toward a shaded alcove where a woman is kneading dough with her elbows deep in a tub of grain paste. She glances up and says something in a sleepy dialect you don't understand, then points her teeth and mimics a scraping motion. Right. Tooth cleaning. You gesture back, and she pulls from her apron a little bundle wrapped in cloth. 3 small twigs, a bit of crushed salt, and a sprig of something greenish. She offers it to you like it's the most normal thing in the world. And maybe for her it is. Fringe evidence from clay tablets suggests that even commoners had access to simple oral tools. Chewing sticks, what we later call meswak in other regions, likely existed here too, though we don't have direct written proof from Sumer itself. Similar tools appear in neighboring cultures around the same time frame, so it's not a stretch to assume they were used. The texture of the twigs, when chewed, would separate into bristles naturally. A built-in brush, straight from the tree. Early DIY. Of course, historians still argue whether these sticks were used primarily for cleaning or for freshening the breath. Because let's face it, even ancient people probably knew when they smelled funky. You duck beneath a hanging mat and enter a small home where a young boy, half asleep, is crouched beside a bowl of water. He dips one of the twigs in the water, chews the end until it frays, then begins gently scraping at his front teeth. His eyes are barely open. This is clearly part of the routine. Not glamorous, not dramatic, just part of waking up. It's not minty. It's not electric. There's no catchy jingle. But there's something oddly satisfying about it. The simplicity, the groundedness, the way it connects body and earth with no middleman. Of course, You can't help but wonder how effective this method really was. Sure, it gets some stuff off, but what about infections? Gum disease? Rotting molars? Well, that's the thing. They didn't have dental floss. They didn't know about bacteria. But they did know about pain. They knew when a tooth throbbed, when gums bled, when breath turned so foul it became a social liability. And that's where the next part of the story begins. With Twigs in hand and curiosity piqued, you follow the slow rhythm of the village deeper into its rituals of daily dental care. Ahead, the sun rises lazily over the horizon, and the air begins to shimmer with warmth. You're not in a hurry. You've got a whole day and night of oral exploration ahead. You walk with the flow of early morning foot traffic, mostly slow, barefoot figures carrying baskets or bundles, yawning and blinking under the low golden sun. The path you're following is packed hard by countless stalls and cartwheels. A child runs past you with a long stalk of something green in his mouth, chewing idly. You make a mental note. It looks like the same kind of twig the woman from earlier had given you. You trail the boy until he veers off toward the market district. It's nothing flashy, just a wide clearing of flat earth hemmed in by wooden stalls, clay tables, and hanging reed mats offering shade. There's a hum in the air. Not the bustle of commerce exactly, more the slow motion buzz of people preparing to pretend to be busy. You settle into the scene like it's a soft couch. Eventually, your attention lands on a stall where a man in a worn linen tunic is carefully bundling twigs. Not just any twigs. These are smooth, slim, and oddly uniform. Their tips are trimmed cleanly, and some ends appear slightly darkened like they've been heated. The man notices you looking, grins sleepily, and gestures for you to come closer. He points to the bundles, then to a faded wooden sign with a drawing etched into it. A mouth, crudely rendered, with a twig poking toward a toothy grin. Simple advertising, but effective. This is your first brush, pun intended, with the ancient Iraq tree, what some later cultures would call the Salvadora persica. Though it wouldn't be officially labeled or studied for millennia, it's believed that certain regions of Mesopotamia had access to this hardy plant, which grows in arid environments and naturally produces antibacterial compounds in its fibers. Mainstream historical consensus leans toward the idea that these sticks, what we now sometimes call chewing sticks or meswak, were the earliest form of toothbrush, and in the sweltering context of early civilization, they were about as good as it got. You pick one up. It's light, slightly fibrous, and when you nibble the end gently, it splits into soft bristles. The taste is earthy, not refreshing exactly, but not unpleasant. Just a subtle bitterness that lingers at the back of your tongue, like strong green tea that someone forgot to sweeten. The vendor hands you a small clay pot filled with water and gestures for you to wet the bristles. Then he demonstrates a slow brushing motion, gentle circles over the front teeth, then short scrapes along the gum line. It's surprisingly methodical for something that predates dental schools by about 4,000 years. Of course, historians still argue whether the Iraq tree twigs used here were imported or locally sourced. The plant doesn't grow in every corner of the ancient Near East, so it's possible that this market has access to some small trade network. Or maybe the sticks came from something else entirely, a similar native plant with soft fibers and medicinal properties. The name's been lost to time, but the habit? That's stuck. A young woman steps up to the stall beside you, plucks a stick from the pile, and hands the vendor a couple of fishhooks as barter. She chews off the old bristles of her current stick and spits them casually into the dirt, then tucks the new one behind her ear. A personal grooming tool, always ready. Think of it like having floss in your wallet. If your wallet were a folded cloth pouch full of dried figs and maybe a bronze needle. You thank the vendor with a slight bow, and he nods, already turned to help someone else. The market is waking up now. You can smell roasting onions, hear the slow clunk of amphora lids being lifted, and the soft clatter of fish scales hitting stone. You drift along the stalls, watching more people chewing on sticks or rinsing their mouths at large clay water jugs. One man gags dramatically after a rinse and shouts something that makes everyone laugh. You catch just enough to understand. He thinks his wife's new cleaning powder tastes like donkey feet. You stop near a woman selling bundles of herbs and ask her about the sticks. She squints at you, sizes you up, and says, if you got breath like a camel's backside, you need a rack. If you got teeth like a goat's knees, you need salt. She winks. It's hard to tell if she's teasing or if that's actual advice. Next to her is a child sorting crushed salt into tiny leather pouches. Some are plain. Others are mixed with what appears to be ash. Yes, actual ash from burned date palms, and the occasional bright scrap of dried mint or sage. These were the additives people mixed with their brushing twigs or rubbed directly onto their teeth. Was it effective? Maybe a little. Was it abrasive? Almost definitely. But hey, nothing says clean like a freshly sanded molar. You scoop a pinch between your fingers and rub it gently against your thumb. It's coarser than modern toothpaste, sure, but it smells oddly clean. Not minty, not sugary. Just clean in that ancient, pre-perfume way. One tablet fragment from the city of Nippur mentions a ritual involving the bitter wood that opens a mouth, which may refer to this exact kind of twig, though whether it was used before a ritual incantation or just for general hygiene remains, like most ancient things, up for debate. As the sun climbs higher, you duck into the shaded side of the market and find a low bench to sit on. A passing stranger hands you a small cup of barley water. You sip slowly. It tastes faintly of earth and dried apricots. You run your tongue across your teeth. Still gritty, but maybe a little better. A goat snuffles at your foot, and you gently push it away with your sandal. Around you, the market moves slowly, as if the entire village is caught in a half-dream. People brush their teeth, trade jokes, and pass the morning in the oldest kind of self-care, the quiet, habitual kind. Not dramatic, not glamorous, but deeply human. The sun has climbed high enough now to bleach the roofs white and turn every shade of clay into shimmering gold. You rise from the bench, stretch lazily, and let your feet guide you toward the temple quarter, where the air grows quieter and the mud brick lanes are worn smoother from centuries of use. The scent here is different, not the bread and sweat of the market, but incense, oil, and something oddly metallic, like old coins left too long in the rain. A pair of temple attendants, barefoot, robed in simple linen, shuffle past carrying a heavy urn. They nod at you without curiosity. In this place, everyone moves slowly. The pace is sacred. You follow them into the courtyard of a modest temple dedicated to Gula, the goddess of healing. Her image, faintly carved into the lintel above the door, shows her holding a stylized dog, her symbolic companion. Inside, the walls are cool and shaded, decorated with clay plaques offering thanks for everything from safe childbirth to relief from tooth pain. And that, as it turns out, is your next stop on this oral odyssey, the intersection of tooth care and temple medicine. In ancient Mesopotamia, illness, dental or otherwise, was almost always seen through a spiritual lens. A toothache wasn't just an infection. It was a message. Perhaps you'd angered a god, or neglected a ritual, or maybe, as one cuneiform tablet suggests, the demons of the mouth have taken root in the tooth. Charming. You duck under a low arch and find yourself in a small side chamber where a priest healer is preparing a kind of paste. She grinds something dark and sticky in a shallow stone bowl, charcoal maybe or resin, and mixes it with oil. When she sees you watching, she raises an eyebrow and gestures toward the empty stool beside her. You sit cautiously. She holds up a small, chipped figurine of a human head with its mouth wide open and makes a brushing motion over the mouth with a reed stick. Then she pantomimes moaning and clutching her jaw. A performance, clearly. But you understand, this is about pain relief, not prevention. And the paste? Probably medicine, if you squint hard enough and pray loudly enough. Some clay tablets recovered from sites like Ashur and Nineveh record basic dental treatments. Rinses made from beer or vinegar, salves of fig sap and crushed garlic, even instructions to heat and apply certain tree resins to abscesses. In this pre-scientific world, medicine was half botany, half magic, and always a little bit hopeful. The priest dips her fingers into the black paste and offers you a small dab on a bit of cloth. You sniff it. There's definitely ash in there. Maybe burnt barley. Possibly myrrh. And definitely something astringent enough to make your gums tingle. She points to your mouth, mimics rubbing, then waves her hand in a spiraling motion upward. as if sending a prayer into the sky. You give it a try. It's bitter, pungent, and sticks like tar to your molars. But it's also oddly cooling. You imagine someone with a raging toothache finding comfort in this. If not because it works, then because someone tried to help. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian dental treatments were more ritual than remedy. Some tablets include invocations to specific gods alongside recipes, suggesting that even the most practical-looking paste was accompanied by spoken prayers, charms, or whispered pleas to expel the demon of decay. Whether or not the gods intervened, the act of doing something likely brought psychological relief, if not physical. You hear low chanting from deeper in the temple, and follow the sound into a side corridor lined with clay shelves. Each shelf holds bundles of dried herbs, stones, and odd talismans. One row contains tiny clay teeth, each marked with a different symbol. Offerings? Curses? Maybe just an early filing system for patient complaints. No one's quite sure. Further down the corridor, you pass a small basin filled with what looks like cloudy water. A reed ladle floats lazily on its surface. You scoop a bit and sniff. Sour, definitely vinegar, possibly infused with something herbal. Rinsing the mouth with vinegars or wine was a known practice in Mesopotamia, not just for cleaning, but for its symbolic cleansing properties. After all, if pain was caused by spirits, you had to wash them out somehow. You lean over and cautiously rinse your mouth with a sip. It stings. It clears your sinuses. It also tastes like someone tried to pickle your gums. Still, you can almost feel the ancient logic. Pain equals invasion. Vinegar equals purification. It might not stand up in a modern clinic, but it feels deeply human. Outside the chamber, a young acolyte is using a curved bone implement to poke at something between his teeth. A few small bronze tools hang from his belt, one shaped like a scoop, another like a hook. You raise an eyebrow, and he shrugs, showing you a small scrap of food he's dislodged. Just like that, you've stumbled into ancient flossing. Dental tools, rudimentary as they were, did exist. Archaeologists have uncovered bronze picks and probes from this region, some of which may have doubled as tooth-cleaning instruments. Whether they were used daily or just during emergencies is still debated. But the concept of physically removing debris wasn't lost on these people. And then there's the matter of breath. You pass a clay tablet half buried in a recess that shows a man offering a sprig of herb to another man with lines, maybe scent lines, coming from his mouth. Breath was important. Perhaps not in the minty fresh way we imagine, but socially, spiritually, and romantically. Chewing herbs, rinsing with wine, even wearing small sachets of aromatic leaves around the neck. These were the Mesopotamian breath mints. You step back into the courtyard and squint at the midday sky. The temple's shadows stretch longer now. You've seen the spiritual side of dental care, the prayers, the potions, the bone tools that border on dental horror, but also the earnestness behind it all. They weren't just trying to survive. They were trying to live well, even if, well, sometimes meant chewing on a stick dipped in tree sap and hoping the tooth demon packed up and left. You leave the shaded quiet of the temple district and step back into the hazy noon heat, blinking as the dry air presses in again. Somewhere nearby, a donkey lets out a disgruntled bray, one of those long, echoing ones that sound like it contains centuries of complaints. You feel it in your ribs. As your eyes adjust, you notice a narrow alley branching off the main street. A few figures disappear into it, ducking under hanging laundry and winding between walls plastered with sun-baked mud and bits of crushed shell. You follow at a lazy pace, drawn by the sound of water and laughter ahead. This turns out to be the bathhouse district, not Roman-style marble grandeur, but something older, smaller, and more intimate. The Mesopotamians may not have had indoor plumbing as we know it, but they took hygiene seriously, and communal bathing was a part of life for those who could afford the time and effort. The bathhouse you enter is simple. Clay floors, reed mats, a low stone bench for sitting, and a cistern of warm water slowly heated by the sun. Nearby, women pour water over their arms from smooth ceramic pitchers, while a man in the corner tends to a small brazier, adding herbs and fragrant resins. The scent reminds you vaguely of time, with a hint of bitter citrus. A kind of ancient steam room. A young boy scrubs his arms vigorously with a rounded pumice stone, and next to him, A woman massages her gums with a bundle of fresh twigs, not unlike the ones you saw earlier. But these are still leafy, green, pliable, and wet. She spits discreetly into a clay bowl beside her and goes back to humming softly. This is where dental care becomes social. It's not just a morning routine done alone in your home. It's woven into the day's community rhythms. Markets, temples, bathhouses. You take a seat on a low bench and watch the way the locals interact. Teeth cleaning isn't a chore. It's a communal ritual, like getting your hair braided at the village square or catching up on gossip at the well. Someone hands you a gourd cup of slightly sour milk mixed with honey. You sip, and it coats your teeth in a thick, sticky layer that makes you want to rinse immediately. The irony is not lost on you. A man sitting nearby catches your expression and chuckles. Milk tooth, he says in a tongue you somehow understand. He hands you a reed brush soaked in something pale and gritty. It's a soft slurry made from powdered salt, perhaps with crushed oyster shells or some form of chalk mixed in, an abrasive cleaner. You brush gently, the texture slightly rough but oddly satisfying. Some scholars believe that mixtures like this, primitive dentifrices, were used alongside chewing sticks. The exact ingredients vary by region and wealth. Charred bone, ash, even ground-up pottery shards were rumored ingredients. And while that last one sounds more like an accident than a recipe, it wouldn't be the weirdest thing early people rubbed on their teeth. Historians still argue whether these powders were common household items or reserved for ritual cleaning, like a deep scrub before religious ceremonies or social events. Either way, it's clear that clean teeth had value. Maybe not pearly white, Hollywood clean, but socially acceptable, spiritually significant, and definitely not camel's backside breath. A child runs by, giggling and flinging droplets of water everywhere. You dodge a splash and consider how different, and how similar, this place is from your own world. The tools are ancient, the methods improvisational, but the intent is universal. To feel fresh, to look presentable, to not repulse your neighbors. You watch as a woman pulls a small pouch from her sash and dabs a bit of oil onto her fingertip. She massages it along her gums in a slow, practiced motion. The oil smells floral, likely sesame or cedarwood. Oils were used in Mesopotamian hygiene, not just for skin and hair, but for the mouth, too. Some had antibacterial properties. Others were just soothing. And some, you suspect, were used mostly because they made people smell less like themselves. In a corner of the bathhouse, a quiet game is underway. Two older men drawing lines in the dirt, placing pebbles, arguing softly about whose move it is. One of them reaches into a pouch and pops a dried clove into his mouth. He chews it thoughtfully as he studies the board. You can almost hear the crackle of ancient nerves sighing in relief. Clove, as it turns out, was a prized import even in these early days, though not native to Mesopotamia. Traces of clove have been found in ancient sites, hinting at early trade with South Asia. Whether these Mesopotamians knew it could dull pain or just like the taste is unknown. But either way, that man's teeth probably feel a little less grumbly now. A dog saunters in sleek, sandy furred, wearing a charm around his neck, and flops beside the cistern. No one shoos it away. In fact, someone drops a chunk of barley cake near its paws. The dog sniffs, sneezes, and eats it slowly. You're reminded again that Gula, goddess of healing, favored dogs. Their presence here feels more medicinal than accidental. You find a small mirror, well, not a mirror exactly, a piece of polished bronze propped in a stone niche. You lean in and inspect your own teeth, still imperfect, a little discolored from that vinegar rinse, but somehow clean, or maybe just cared for. You give yourself a sleepy, slightly crooked smile. The hum of conversation rises and falls. Water sloshes. The scent of cedar and salt lingers in your nostrils. A soft breeze nudges at the hanging mats near the entrance, and outside, the shadows have begun to stretch long again. There's something oddly comforting about being here. In a world without dental insurance, fluoride, or x-rays, people still found ways to care for their teeth. With twigs, with salt, with oil, with laughter. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. You meander out of the bathhouse district feeling both slightly cleaner and oddly more ancient, as if brushing your teeth with twig and ashes realigned your soul with a slower, more clay-smeared version of reality. The sun is dipping now, low enough to cast long amber streaks across the ground and bathe the mud brick walls in warm shadow. Following the scent of roasting onions and something faintly nutty, you drift toward the residential quarter, the heart of daily Mesopotamian life, where families argue over bread portions, neighbors shout greetings across rooftops, and someone, always, is grinding grain before supper. It's here, amid the cracked courtyards and stacked sleeping mats, that dental care becomes domestic. You duck under a canopy strung between two homes and find yourself in a narrow courtyard, where a woman crouches over a grindstone. She's humming as she works, pounding seeds into paste with a rhythmic thunk-thunk-thunk. Her toddler is nearby, gnawing enthusiastically on, well, it looks like a dried fig impaled on a stick. Not exactly FDA approved, but the kid seems thrilled. And here's the thing, that fig isn't just food, it's function. In homes across ancient Mesopotamia, edible abrasives were likely the norm. Chewable twigs, date pits, lightly burnt bread crusts, even dried legumes. Anything with texture could become a tool, and in a culture that prized pragmatism, food and hygiene weren't always separate categories. You sit beside a low wall and watch a teenage boy rub his teeth with what looks like a wad of date fibers. He's methodical, serious, probably preparing for a meal with someone important, or maybe just trying to outshine his cousin's smile. Who knows? In any case, it works. When he spits, the fiber bundle is darker, flecked with whatever snacks he's dislodged. Satisfying. Mainstream historical records don't give us blow-by-blow accounts of Mesopotamian bedtime routines. There's no, "Dear diary, brush teeth with salt twig, avoided neighbor's goat again." But when archaeologists find worn toothpicks made of bone or fine grooves in teeth suggesting repetitive scrubbing, they piece together these moments of human maintenance. Quiet, private, persistent. A grandmother appears, carrying a tray of roasted chickpeas and something that looks suspiciously like goat cheese. She smiles at you, offers a handful, then sits down and begins swishing her mouth with water. Slow, thoughtful swirls, like she's tasting the past. Then she spits discreetly into a clay bowl and pats her stomach, satisfied. This, you realize, is an early form of oil pulling, or at least the mouthwash equivalent. Whether water, wine, oil, or vinegar, these rinses were more than refreshers. Some contained herbs like mint or anise. Others were just bracingly sour to cut through oily foods. And still others were accompanied by whispered prayers, little spells against decay, or offerings to protect your speech. Historians still argue whether these household rinses were prescribed by temple healers or passed down through generations of sharp-tongued aunties. Some clay tablets include instructions that read more like family recipes than medical texts. Take the sap of the fig tree, boil it with beer, speak the words of gula and wash. You can practically hear the eye roll of the teenage scribe copying it. In the corner of the courtyard, a young girl holds up a crooked stick with one end frayed, like a small broom. It's dark at the tip, perhaps stained with ash or dipped in something sweet. She presses it to her gums, winces, then keeps going. Practice makes painless. This miswak method, though more famous in later Islamic tradition, has deep roots in oral care throughout ancient regions. The idea was simple: a chewing stick that doubled as brush, pick, and possibly even toothpaste, depending on how creative you got with it. The Mesopotamians didn't call it that, of course, but their habits echoed the same wisdom. Nearby, a father is carefully plucking tiny splinters from a palm twig, smoothing its end. He dips it into a small jar, likely filled with sesame oil and powdered stone, and tests its bristles on his thumb. Satisfied, he hands it to his son. The boy begins brushing with intense focus, like he's gearing up for a public speaking event, or possibly a snack. You're offered another brush, shorter, softer, lightly soaked. You take it and begin your own sleepy strokes, back and forth, up and down, like a lullaby for your teeth. The texture is strange at first, a bit squeaky, but the act becomes meditative. You can feel the rhythm in your wrists, hear the echo of the grindstone, smell the mingling herbs in the courtyard air. A neighbor passes by with a bundle of bitter herbs slung over her shoulder. She pauses, breaks off a small twig, and tucks it behind her ear like a flower. It's part decoration, part utility. You're told later it's wormwood, used not just a brush, but to ward off mouth infections and keep bad dreams at bay. 2 birds, 1 twig. Even the children are in on the routine. A toddler waddles around gnawing on a stick of licorice root, his mouth dyed faintly pink. He's learning, absorbing, imitating. These habits are as much performance as they are hygiene, ritualized over generations until they become second nature. And somewhere between the ash, the fig paste, the twig bristles, and the shared evening water, you start to understand. This isn't just about clean teeth. It's about control. In a world of droughts and floods, of unpredictable gods and volatile kings, brushing your teeth with a stick dipped in salt was something you could do every day, no matter what. The courtyard dims as the sky fades into dusty blue. A brazier crackles to life, filling the air with smoke and comfort. The brushing slows. Someone sings a low lullaby. Someone else spits. It's all part of the same ancient rhythm. Life, mess cleaning, sleep, and you, honorary Mesopotamian for the day. Sit among them, mouth tingly, teeth slightly gritty, heart strangely full. The stars are starting to bloom above the rooftops like quiet little embers, and the streets are thinning out as the city exhales. You wander, now slower than before, guided by the soft clack of sandals and the occasional snore of a merchant who's dozed off beside his last basket of lentils. A breeze picks up, warm and dry, dragging the scent of firewood, barley bread, and something vaguely minty. You follow that mint, not metaphorically. You're genuinely curious now. Your Mesopotamian hygiene scavenger hunt has taken you from temples to bathhouses to backyards, and now it's pointing you toward the city's medical quarter, where scribes of a different kind worked under flickering lamps and clay shells grown with ancient knowledge. The herbalist's house is tucked between a potter's shop and a tannery you'd rather not remember the smell of. Inside, it's cool, shadowed, and packed wall-to-wall with drying herbs, crushed resins, and unlabeled jars that rattle ominously when bumped. You're immediately greeted by a sleepy-eyed apprentice who barely looks up from his pestle and mortar. "Teeth?" he asks, already reaching for a packet. He hands you a small satchel of powder, light green, pungent, and suspiciously fizzy when you sniff it too hard. "Mint, cumin, ground fishbone, dry date husk," he says, like it's no big deal. "Good for mouth demons." Ah, yes, the ever-popular mouth demons. In ancient Mesopotamian belief, oral disease wasn't caused by bacteria, because microscopes hadn't RSVP'd history yet, but by angry spirits that lodged themselves in the teeth and gums, especially if you'd said too many curse words or eaten without giving thanks. Toothaches were considered punishments. Your mouth, it seemed, was a battleground of behavior and bacteria, though they didn't quite have that second word yet. To fight these demons, healers employed a mix of practical and spiritual remedies. You might chew a particular root, rinse with salt water, or recite a protective chant while rubbing your gums with fish bile. Sometimes all 3. If the pain didn't leave, they figured the demon was stubborn, or you were. You sit on a low stool while the apprentice demonstrates. Pinch of powder on the twig brush, moisten with a few drops of what you suspect is sesame oil, then rub gently along the gum line while chanting softly. The chant sounds like a shopping list, repetitive, sing-song, oddly relaxing. You join in, though you're not entirely sure you're not cursing someone by mistake. Historians still argue whether these chants were meant to summon protection or just distract from the pain. The apprentice mumbles, or both. He sneezes into his sleeve and offers you a sprig of something sharp-smelling. Chew that, unless you're scared of dreams. You chew. It tastes like mint with vengeance, followed by a chalky aftertaste that suggests someone left their spice mix on a windowsill for a month. It numbs your tongue a little, but your breath smells divine. A win. In the corner of the room, a more experienced healer scribbles cuneiform symbols onto a clay tablet, while squinting at a half-crushed beetle in a saucer. He's muttering something about tooth rot and moon phases. You edge closer. Apparently, some healers believed lunar cycles influence mouth pain. If you had a molar throb during a waxing moon, it meant the demon was feeding. If it hurt during the waning moon, the demon was leaving. This would determine whether they prescribed a poultice or a ceremonial rinse, or, in one extreme case mentioned on a tablet fragment, a goose feather plucked under moonlight. Unfortunately, the tablet breaks off before we learn what happened to Goose. A clay tablet propped on a shelf near you offers a remedy. For the tooth that dances in the jaw, mix crushed henbane with beer and the ash of river reeds. Place at the root. Speak the name of Ninkarak thrice. You don't try this one. The henbane alone could put you to sleep for a week, or give you visions of winged goats. Still, it speaks to the blend of pharmacology and spirituality that defined Mesopotamian medicine. Tooth care wasn't just about comfort. It was about harmony. A mouth free of pain was a sign that your body, your speech, and your soul were in order. The apprentice pulls out a small figurine from beneath the work table, a clay model of a head with an exaggerated grimace and tiny holes for teeth. We use these, he says, tapping the grimace, to teach. Whether he means to teach students or warn demons isn't quite clear, but either way, it's unnerving. The figurine's tiny eyes seem to judge your molars. He offers you a parting gift, a rolled reed tied with twine. For your dreams, he says, brush before sleep, then burn the tip for luck. You nod solemnly, as if this is a thing you already do regularly. You thank him, even if your tongue still feels like it licked a spice merchant sandal. Outside, the city has dimmed further. The stars are out in force now, clustered in lazy constellations of Sumerians, once named after bulls, lions, and ambiguous goats. You walk slowly, brushing absently with your new reed as you go, tasting the last of that bitter mint as it mingles with the memory of roasted chickpeas. And here's a thought that floats across your sleepy mind. For all our electric toothbrushes and mini gels and high-tech dental floss, the people of ancient Mesopotamia weren't so different. They brushed, rinsed, worried, chanted, and chewed. They cared about fresh breath, about appearances, about not offending the gods or their neighbors with decaying molars. They even had toothaches. And just like you, they complained about them more than they probably should have. The reed brush swings gently in your hand as you amble back to the winding lanes of Uar. Or perhaps it's Nippur now. Names seem to dissolve in this moonlight. The air is thick with sleep, and so are you. But curiosity still tugs at the edge of your robe, leading you toward one last flicker of lamplight. It's quieter here, away from the herb stalls and fire pits, where the walls are etched with strange patterns and the occasional mewling cat prowls like a tiny guardian of secrets. You pause in an open window. Inside, a figure hunched under lamplight arranges tablets and tools with reverence. This isn't just any healer. It's a temple scribe, the kind who spends their nights decoding omens, collecting knowledge, and sometimes, yes, drafting the earliest dental manuals history forgot to preserve. You ease closer, eavesdropping on the rustle of clay and whispered notes. This, you sense, is where dental theory meets divine order. The scribe is inscribing a new tablet, the stylus tapping softly into wet clay, something about the angry tooth and its relation to broken promises. You blink. Wait, did your premolar hurt because you skipped that offering 2 nights ago? Who's keeping track? The scribe reaches for a lump of waxy resin and murmurs what sounds like a lullaby, except it includes the words pus, evil wind, and upper jaw. You have to admit, it's the coziest possible rendition of oral pathology. According to surviving tablets, some Mesopotamian texts didn't just list treatments. They described symptoms like poetry. A bad tooth was like a worm that dances in the dark, or a stone lodged in the soft mouth. There's one particularly vivid description of tooth pain weeping through the bones of the head. Poetic, yes. Soothing? Not so much. You lean on the windowsill, thinking about that phrase, evil wind. It shows up a lot in Mesopotamian medicine, and it didn't mean your uncle had beans again. Evil wind was invisible, mischievous, and almost always the culprit behind fevers, nausea, and yes, dental agony. Historians still argue whether the phrase referred to real weather patterns, airborne infections, or just a metaphor for fate blowing in the wrong direction. Either way, you hope the wind keeps its distance tonight. Inside, the scribe dips a thin reed into dark ink, made from soot, oil, and something sharp-smelling, and begins drawing a diagram, not of a tooth, per se, but of a mouth layered with symbols and miniature stars. You realize this is a kind of celestial map. For some temple healers, dental issues weren't just earthly concerns. They were cosmic misalignments. A chipped incisor? That could be Venus frowning on your latest romantic misstep. You duck away before you get diagnosed by Zodiac and continue walking. Your path leads to a narrow alley where another form of healer works, the incantation priest. He's older, wrapped in linen streaked with ash, and he doesn't bother with herbs or powders. His tools are words. He chants softly beside a sickly-looking man holding a swollen cheek. The chant is mesmerizing, full of repeating syllables and rhythmic pauses. You catch fragments. Let the mouth open like barley at sunrise. Let the tooth fall like rain from the roof beam. May the demon forget the name of pain. It's oddly beautiful. Maybe that's the point. Open scholarly debate continues around whether these oral incantations had medicinal effect or were simply psychological comfort. But isn't that the case with most bedtime rituals? Whether it's a story, a warm drink, or someone murmuring charms at your aching gums, it helps, even if just enough. The priest wraps a thin string around the patient's finger and then tugs it 3 times. It might symbolize drawing the pain out, or perhaps it's just a folk trick passed down from when temples were little more than goat hair tents. Either way, the man's breathing slows. His shoulders drop. The toothache or the fear of it begins to recede. You're offered a seat and a strip of linen soaked in something sharp and citrusy. Chew this until you forget your worries. The priest says, "Spit it toward the west." You follow instructions. The flavor is somewhere between vinegar and old onion, but the act of chewing, the focused grind of jaw and mind, is meditative. You spit ceremoniously into the dark. The priest grins, revealing a row of uneven teeth. "Even I cannot fix everything," he says, tapping one particularly enthusiastic molar. "But we try." There's something oddly comforting about that. As you rise, you notice a child watching from a doorway. She holds a small clay figurine, another grimacing mouth, just like the one at the herbalist's place, except this one has a tiny scroll tucked inside its head. "For the pain to escape," she whispers. You nod gravely, as if you totally understand tooth exorcisms. The alley darkens. You begin your way back toward the residential quarter, hands tucked into your sleeves, breath still tinged faintly with mint and mystery. You've met healers who chant, who crush herbs, who map teeth to constellations and demons alike, each with their own idea what causes pain and how to send it packing. And somewhere in that blend of faith and science, of chewing twigs and chewing words, you recognize the truth. That oral care was never just about teeth. It was about the body, the spirit, and 1,000 tiny rituals that made people feel safe, even if only for a night. You pause beneath a fig tree whose leaves shiver gently in the breeze. You pluck a twig and bite the end, softening it with your teeth until it frays. Then you begin to brush, slowly, rhythmically, in tune with the crickets and distant flute music, like a Sumerian lullaby, playing just for your molars. You wake up early the next morning, or maybe you never really slept, just floated to the pre-dawn quiet like a lazy breeze off the Euphrates. Either way, the city is stirring, and you got that oddly fresh, post-brush feeling from your twig ritual under the fig tree. The kind of clean that makes you feel slightly superior to the goats chewing grass across the road. Your feet take you toward the market square, where early rising vendors are setting up their wares under patchwork awnings. Everything smells faintly of baked clay and wet dust. A boy carrying a bucket sloshes warm water over the street stones. Someone sneezes behind a cart of coriander. You yawn. It's definitely too early for coriander. But you're not here for spice. You're here for gossip. Because it turns out, much like today, people in ancient Mesopotamia were obsessed with other people's teeth. Bad breath, missing molars, blackened gums. These things could ruin your social standing faster than spilling beer on a priest's sandals. You settle near a basket seller who clearly doubles as a local expert on everyone's personal hygiene. She's already telling someone about her neighbor's molar that smells like old fish and angry gods. You can't help but smile. Apparently, dental issues weren't just a personal inconvenience. They were community events. Oral hygiene was a matter of etiquette, especially if you want to keep your job, your marriage, or your seat at the local beer tavern. Imagine trying to flirt at a feast with a breath that smells like fermented lentils. Not a great look or taste. In fact, Clay tablets mention grooming rituals before religious ceremonies, legal proceedings, and social gatherings. People were expected to arrive not just washed but fresh-mouthed. 2. That often meant brushing with twigs, rinsing with beer, or better yet, chewing aromatics like cardamom, cinnamon bark, or anise seeds. If you could afford it, dried rose petals mixed with oil were a crowd pleaser. It was basically the Mesopotamian version of popping a breath mint. And if you didn't freshen up, well, let's just say that offending the gods could just as easily mean offending your neighbor's nose. There's one particularly amusing law from the Sumerian city of Lagash that scholars argue might have been a hygiene-related fine. The wording is vague. Something about the stench of a man's mouth disturbing the assembly, and whether it meant literal odor or metaphorical rudeness is still debated. Either way, the fine involved sheep, and you don't want to know where they were supposed to stand during the punishment. You continue meandering toward a nearby artisan's courtyard, drawn by the rhythmic scrape of carving tools. A sculptor is chiseling a votive statue, carefully shaping lips and a set of gleaming teeth with an attention to detail that borders on obsessive. You lean in. Offerings for Ninkarak. The sculptor says, barely looking up, Lady of Healing, if your teeth ache. She listens best when you give her a smile. You nod solemnly. Of course, why wouldn't a goddess of health prefer dental symmetry? It's not the only statue you've seen with perfect teeth. In fact, a surprising number of Mesopotamian figurines display toothy grins, especially ones meant for healing or blessing. Historians still argue whether this artistic choice reflected beauty ideals, medical hope, or just a sculptor's sense of humor. After all, no one wants to pray to a deity with plaque. As you sit and watch the artisan work, you think back to herbalist shop, the incantation priest's alley, the grimacing figurines, and all those softly muttered chants. You start to notice a pattern. Oral care in Mesopotamia wasn't just about utility. It was deeply performative, a social ritual, a way to demonstrate discipline, respectability, even piety. You pull your little reed brush from your sash and twirl it idly between your fingers. There's pride in it now. It's not just a tool, it's a badge of belonging, a way of saying, hey, I've got my life together. My teeth don't squeak when I smile. And then, across the courtyard, a group of children erupts in laughter. They're chasing each other with feather dusters and what looks suspiciously like toothbrush twigs, shrieking nonsense about kissing demons and toothworms. You can't help but grin. Even then, kids found ways to turn hygiene into games, even if they didn't always aim for the mouth. You follow their chaos through the winding alleyways and end up at a small schoolhouse, just a stone bench under a tree, really, with a harried scribe trying to teach 5 restless students how to copy cuneiform. The lesson today? A recipe for dental salve. You hear him recite it slowly. Take the bark of the tamarisk, the salt of the southern marsh, the oil of the pressed seed, mix under the eye of the waxing moon. His tone suggests he's recited this 100 times, and at least 99 of those were ignored. One of the students is definitely chewing the clay stylus. You sit quietly at the back of the class and mouth the ingredients along with them, savoring the rhythm. Tamarisk bark, salt, pressed oil. It's oddly calming, like a recipe passed down through generations, not just for utility, but for identity. This is who we are, it seems to say. People who chew sticks, crush herbs, and whisper names into the wind, so our teeth will stop throbbing. Eventually, the scribe dismisses a group, and you help him stack the tablets. He thanks you with a soft grunt and offers a final piece of advice. If your mouth stings, don't blame your soul. Blame the wind. Then spit. You leave the schoolhouse, feeling lighter, a little mintier, definitely more aware of your molars than you ever expected. As the sun reaches its peak and the shadows curl away from the walls, you tuck the reed back into your sash. Your stomach growls. Brushing, it turns out, is an excellent appetizer. By midday, the city of UR is humming, a heat-soaked symphony of sandals on stone, clay on clay, and shouting over too many kind of onions. You wander back through the bazaar, past jars of honey dates and spools of dyed wool, your ears still echoing with the recipe for tamarisk bark paste. You're starting to notice it everywhere now. The obsession with the mouth, carved on door frames, stitched into amulets, sung in lullabies. Oral hygiene isn't just something people do here. It's something they believe in, a daily rite, like prayer or laundry, if your laundry involves soot and salt and chanting about demons and your canines. This time, your feet carry you into the scribal quarter, a warren of narrow halls and tablet-laden rooms where students learn to become masters of the written word. And apparently, part-time dentists. You duck into a shaded courtyard where a group of apprentices are mid-recitation. Their voices rise in awkward unison. If the tooth shakes but does not fall, mix myrrh and water, recite the call. Their instructor, a squat man with ink-stained fingers and a heroic unibrow, nods approvingly. Again, he bellows. They groan but obey. You take a seat in the corner, unnoticed. The lesson continues with more rhymes and instructions, some practical, some downright mythological. One involves tying a hair from a black ox around your wrist before biting a bronze amulet shaped like a lion's face. You blink. That one doesn't show up in modern dental journals. Historians still argue whether this kind of ritualized learning was purely symbolic, or if Mesopotamian apprentices really dabbled in proto-dentistry. But the tablets don't lie. Dental lore made it into official records, wrapped in incantations and tucked between land deeds and star maps. Somewhere between Saturn's cycle and the king's taxes, there was room for a molar remedy. You stay until the lesson ends, then trail after few students as they trudge off in search of lunch. One of them, barely 12, proudly waves a small wooden box in your direction. Inside are 5 tiny twigs, a ball of clay, and what looks suspiciously like powdered copper. His emergency smile kit, he calls it. You try not to laugh. It's adorable, and probably more hygienic than whatever the fishmonger is chewing on right now. Speaking of chewing, your own stomach's still staging a protest. You finally give in and follow your nose to a small courtyard cafe where lentil stew simmers in massive bronze pots. The owner, a cheerful woman with a gap-toothed grin, ladles you a generous portion and waves you toward a shaded table. You look like someone who thinks too much, she says. Eat. You obey. The stew is warm, thick, and spiced with cumin, and as you chew slowly, respectfully even, you notice something unexpected. Your mouth doesn't feel sore, your teeth feel oddly clean. Is this what ancient Mesopotamians felt after a really good twiggery session? Or is it just the comfort of ritual, the quiet satisfaction of taking care of something that matters? Across the cafe, a man haggles loudly over sesame cakes while his toddler teeters nearby with what looks like a mouthful of crushed date pits. The woman rolls her eyes. He'll learn to chew properly, she mutters, or marry someone who doesn't mind feeding him soup. Dental health, it seems, is also about partnership and expectations. You stay at the cafe long enough to watch a group of elderly men begin their afternoon game of hounds and jackals, an ancient board game made of ivory pegs and a long wooden track. One of them, white-bearded and impossibly wrinkled, slaps his thigh and proclaims, I once lost a tooth laughing so hard, I swallowed it. Everyone laughs, except one man, who leans in and whispers, teeth don't go to the afterlife, you know. That's why the gods don't smile. There's a beat of silence, and then someone throws a date pit at him. Apparently, this is not considered helpful table talk. Still, his comment lingers. Did they really believe that? You think back to those votive statues with perfect teeth. Maybe they were overcompensating. Maybe they were offerings for what couldn't follow you into death. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamians viewed the body as whole and sacred, or as a vessel that could be repaired like a broken jug. Replace a tooth, replace a handle, no big deal. But that theory hits a snag when you consider how tenderly they treated the mouth. After lunch, you drift toward the river. The air smells like wet reeds and clay. A few kids are skipping stones while a fisherman mends a net with the patience of someone who once used his teeth to do it faster. You pass him just as he bites through a knot with practiced ease and mutters, Still got it. You grin. Maybe dental strength was a flex. A short walk upriver brings you to a little shrine nestled between 2 acacia trees. It's dedicated to Gula, another goddess of healing, often shown with a dog in a star-studded robe. Offerings here are small, fruit, broken combs, and, oddly enough, what looks like used toothbrush twigs stacked neatly like kindling. You add your own to the pile. It feels right. You sit beside the shrine and close your eyes for a moment. You've wandered the city, tasted its herbs, listened to its chants. You've learned how people here feared and honored their teeth, how they cleaned them, soothed them, and spoke to them like unruly children. And maybe that's a lesson. The mouth is not just a tool. It's a companion, one worth looking after. The breeze carries a familiar scent, tamarisk and mint, maybe, or just the comfort of repetition. You pull a fresh twig from your sash and begin to fray the end again, like you've done 100 times. Like someone might watch you from the future and think, they knew what they were doing. The sun has begun its slow descent now, casting the city of UR in a hazy, golden hush. Shadows lengthen across the clay walls, and the Euphrates glimmers like a path to nowhere in particular. You got a fresh chewing stick in hand, gently whittled into a soft brush at one end, and admit it, you're starting to enjoy this whole daily oral ritual thing. You make your way down a quieter lane this time, past the ziggurat's towering silhouette, and into a quarter that hums with more than just city noise. This is a neighborhood of the perfumers, salve makers, and the sort of folks who think crushed pearls are an acceptable toothpaste ingredient. If Mesopotamian society had influencers, they lived right here. You pass a stall with little bowls of ash honey and something that smells like crushed violets. A woman with blue-stained fingertips gives you a wink and holds up a lump of gray paste. For when your smile starts to look like your sandals, she offers. You laugh politely and decline. Barely. This is a wealthier part of town. Clearly, the kind of place where people don't just clean their teeth, they curate them. Some households even have personal servants who prep the daily dental twig, cutting it to preferred length, fraying the end, and soaking it in salt water or myrrh for that extra bit of fresh. Historians still debate whether these rituals were born out of vanity, practicality, or deeper spiritual beliefs. Was this just early cosmetic culture? Or did Mesopotamians believe their breath carried prayers, and that a dirty mouth could sour sacred words? You pass an older man selling packets of fragrant powder wrapped in palm leaf. He invites you to sniff one, and it hits your nose like lemon and dust. Powder for the mouth. Good for teeth, better for reputation, he says with a wink. Apparently, dental scent was as much about social capital as it was about oral health. You buy a small packet out of curiosity. The powder is soft, fine, and slightly metallic. Probably a mix of ground herbs, salt, and crushed shell. When you press a little onto your tongue, it fizzes faintly like a carbonated secret. A little further on, you stumble upon what looks like a beauty school, if your definition of beauty includes black eyeliner and dental hygiene. Inside, apprentices practice making ointments and perfumes, chanting combinations like recipes. One group huddles over a tablet with a diagram that looks suspiciously like a tooth cross-section, though it might also be a cucumber. Interpretations vary. Their instructor, a severe-looking woman with a perfectly symmetrical braid, gestures for you to approach. You've got the smile of a man who drinks river water, she says coolly, before handing you a small ceramic cup. Rinse with this. You obey, expecting bitterness, but are surprised by a surprisingly floral, cool flavor. Mint and barley flour, she explains. Good for heat, bad for secrets. You nod, unsure whether that was a metaphor or just a very specific warning. She leads you to a small shrine inside the school, one dedicated to Ninasina, yet another healing goddess. This one statue has her seated, hands resting on her lap, and here's the twist, a neat set of tiny pearls carved as teeth in her smile. The care taken to sculpt them is oddly moving. Some say if you whisper your pain to her, she'll take it into her own mouth, the woman tells you. Others say she'll spit it back out when she's done with it. You're not sure which version is more comforting. You leave a pinch of your mint powder at the statue's base before stepping outside. It's twilight now, and the perfumer's street is bathed in a soft amber glow. People move slower. The city is winding down. As you walk back through the alleyways, you start to pay attention to people's smiles, or lack thereof. A merchant with gold beads, his beard but teeth stained brown. A child missing her front incisors, laughing like it's the best joke. A priest with surprisingly white canines, muttering a hymn. And then there's you, somewhere in the middle of the dental spectrum, armed with knowledge, a twig, and minty confidence. You pause at a small fountain where water trickles from a carved bull's mouth. Nearby, a group of teenagers is washing their faces and joking about who has the worst breath. One declares he hasn't brushed since the last eclipse. Another insists that kissing a temple singer cured his toothache. You suspect correlation, not causation. And still, even among the laughter and bravado, there's care. One girl meticulously frays the end of her twig and passes it to her friend like it's a sacred torch. No teasing, just respect for a ritual they've probably performed since they could chew. Back in your own corner of the city, night has draped itself over UR like a thick wool blanket. Lamps flicker to life, casting shadows on stone, and the scent of roasted onions drifts through the streets. You find a quiet spot on a roof, lay back against a warm wall, and look up at the stars. They're as ancient as the city, as old as the first time someone said, "My tooth hurts," and someone else replied, "Try this twig." You run your tongue along your teeth. Smooth, not bad for a day's work. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell rings softly, a lullaby of clay and copper. You let your eyes close, already half dreaming about talking statues, mini spells, and a goddess who might take your toothache if you ask nicely enough.